So when you think about it, the question said demonstrate the temperature class by writing a separate program, and that's what we're about to do, that asks the user for Fahrenheit temperature. Okay, so let's do that. First, let me go ahead and create a class. So public class, I'll call this temperature test. Okay, temperature test, meaning it's testing the temperature class. I'll go ahead and I'll create my main method. Okay, so it said over here that demonstrate the temperature class by writing a separate program that asks the user for a Fahrenheit temperature. Okay, so we have to use one of Java's features for accepting inputs, either the scanner class or the geoption pane class or something else. But let's go ahead and use the scanner class because in the previous program I used geoption pane. So for this one I'm going to use the scanner class, and for the scanner to use the scanner class you have to go ahead and import the scanner class, right? So that this program can have access to it. So import java.util.scanner, right? So basically you are importing the scanner class in the Java, oops, this is supposed to be a small letter. So you are importing the scanner class in the java.util package, found in the java.util package, all in the Java API. Okay, so now we have the scanner class. We have to go ahead and create a scanner object so that we can use it to accept input, or basically ask the user questions and accept input from the user. So I'm going to go ahead and create a new scanner object. Okay, I'm going to call it scanner. I'm creating a new scanner object. Okay, so I'm basically creating a variable of type scanner that is going to store the reference. Okay, basically store the memory location of the new scanner object I'm about to create. Okay, it's going to hold the memory location of a scanner object. So I'm creating a new scanner object, and I'm passing in the system.in method, which is basically going to accept byte info from the keyboard. Okay, and I'm connecting this object to this variable here, this class type variable. Okay, so this variable is going to hold the reference address, or maybe the memory address of this object that I've just created here. We are using that to accept input from the user. So now we can go ahead and ask the user over here. It says, will the value entered by the user pass to the constructor? So separate program that asks the user for a Fahrenheit temperature. So let's go ahead and ask the user for a Fahrenheit temperature. So system.out.println and ask the user, please enter Fahrenheit temperature. Now this is just a statement. Now we have to use this scanner object to accept inputs from the user. So I call the scanner object scanner. So I'm going to use scanner. I'm going to call scanner.next double, right? Yeah, because we want the temperature. The user can go ahead and type in 25.6 or 30.8. So I'm defining, or basically I'm calling the scanner.next double. And what this is going to do is it's going to pop up some kind of text box, and then allow the user to type in something. Whatever the user types is going to be converted to a double, and it's going to be returned. So when it's returned, we need a place to store it, right? So we have to go ahead and define another double variable that is going to hold the user's Fahrenheit temperature. So let's define a variable called, let's define a double variable called user Fahrenheit. Oops, sorry. User Fahrenheit over here. Okay, so user Fahrenheit temperature. Like this. Double user Fahrenheit temperature. Okay. So basically once whatever the user has typed has been converted to a double, we're going to store it in user Fahrenheit temperature, the variable we've declared here. So like this. All right. So now we'll have the user's Fahrenheit temperature. Now the question over here said that The program should create an instance of the temperature class with the value entered by the user passed to the constructor. Okay, with the value entered by the user, which is user Fahrenheit temperature, passed to the constructor. Now we define a constructor in the temperature class over here to accept the Fahrenheit given, and then set the ftemp field of that object to the Fahrenheit given. So basically, we are setting the ftemp field of this of the object we are about to create to the user Fahrenheit temperature. So now let's go ahead and create an object. Let's go ahead and create a temperature object, right? So to create a temperature object, okay, I need to basically of the temperature type, okay, or basically from the temperature class, I'm creating a variable. I'm going to call it temperature1, or just say temp1. Okay, temp1. Basically, what I've done is similar to creating an integer variable called, let's say, number. This is the type, and this is the name of the variable. You can think of this as a type, and this as a name of the variable. I am creating a variable of type temperature. You can think of it that way. Now, but Java is going to realize that this type is not one of the primitive data types. It's not an int. It's not a double. It's not a character. So it's going to know that you're trying to create a variable that's going to hold an object. Or basically, it's going to look for what it's going to do first. It's going to look in that same folder for a class named temperature, and it's going to find it because you've saved it in that same folder. That's when you've saved it in that same folder. And when you've saved it in that same folder, it's going to see that, okay, you're trying to create an object from that class. So it's going to reserve this variable as a variable that's going to hold a temperature object, right? And then now we are going to go ahead and create a temperature object by using a new keyword. So new temperature. We are creating a new temperature object in memory, right? And with this equal sign, basically, we are assigning the memory address of that object in memory to temp1. So basically, temp1 is going to refer to that object from now onwards. But using the constructor, we said the constructor needs to be passed in. Sorry, we said that the constructor, anytime you call the constructor, you have to go ahead and pass in the Fahrenheit given. You have to basically pass in a Fahrenheit temperature. And the question over here said that over here, we are going to ask the user for the Fahrenheit temperature and create an instance of the temperature class, which we've just done here, with the value entered by the user passed to the constructor. So that's the value we're going to pass to the constructor here, the user Fahrenheit temperature. So that means that when we create this temperature object, its ftemp field, okay, is going to be the Fahrenheit temperature that the user has typed. All right, so now that's what's going to happen. And then after that, it said the program should call the object method to display the temperature in Celsius and Kelvin, right? So now all we have to do is basically display the temperature in Celsius and Kelvin. So let's see. All right, and we know that we have methods for that. We know we have the get Fahrenheit method, and we know we have the get Celsius method. We know that. So let's go ahead and use a system out.printf f function, basically f. So it's system.out.printf because we may need those numbers formatted, right? So let's use the printf method rather than a println, so we can just format those values, right? So now we need to specify a format, and then this is basically what is going to place that format, right? So let's specify the format. Right, so this is what we want to display. We want to basically display, it wants us to display the Fahrenheit temperature converted to Celsius and Kelvin, right? But let's display the Fahrenheit temperature. Let's display this to converted to Celsius temperature, and then let's display converted to Kelvin temperature, right? So now let's just display the Fahrenheit temperature first. So I'm going to create a regular string and say Fahrenheit temperature. Okay, And I'm going to specify a placeholder here and say that something is going to replace it. Okay, now I know that thing is going to be a floating point value, right? So I'm going to type in percentage F, because Fahrenheit temperature is going to be a floating point value. So I'm going to type in a percentage F, okay, meaning that a floating point value, okay, a floating point value is going to replace this. Now, what floating point value is going to replace this, we're going to specify here, but we'll get there. But for now, I'm saying a floating point value is going to replace this percentage F. Okay. Now, with that floating point value, I want it formatted to 2 decimal places, right? So I'm going to also specify the precision of that value that's going to replace this. Basically, when it's a float, I want it also formatted to 2 decimal places. So you specify the precision in between the percentage and the F. I want it formatted to 2 decimal places, so I'll say 0.2 in between the percentage and the F. Right, so 0.2, if I wanted it formatted to 3 decimal places, I'll say 0.3. I want it formatted to 2 decimal places, I'll say 0.2. So this is where I'm specifying the precision. So I'm saying something is going to place this format specifier, and that thing is going to be typed here. But before we get there, let's continue with the format specifier. So this is my format string basically, and that's my format specifier. All right, so Fahrenheit temperature is what I want to display, and then after that, I want to basically right after that create a new line character. Okay, break to the next line by typing in \n. When the interpreter sees this, it's not going to display it. It's going to basically move the position from where it's at to the next line. So anything that comes after this is going to be displayed on that next line. So when this is displayed, it's going to display Fahrenheit temperature, display the value, and then once it sees the \n together, it's going to break from where on that line. If this was the line, once it sees a new line character, it's going to break to the next line, and anything that comes after the new line character is going to be displayed on that next line. So the next thing I want to display is going to be the, let's see, it's going to be the Celsius, okay, and then the Kelvin. So now let's display a Celsius temperature. And the Celsius temperature is also going to be equal to a floating point value, also formatted to 2 decimal places, right? So let's go ahead and copy the same. Oh, let's just type it. So percentage 0.2F, all right? And then right after that, I want another new line character. And the next thing I want to display is going to be the Kelvin temperature. So Kelvin temperature here. Okay, also percentage 0.2F. Oops, $sign. Percentage 0.2F. All right, so now let's specify values that are going to replace these placeholders, right? So basically the values you specify here, I'm going to break this line here by typing in an enter. The values you specify after that, after basically as a second set of arguments, they're going to replace these placeholders respectively. The first value you type here is going to replace this. The second value you type here is going to replace the second placeholder. The third value you type here is going to basically replace the third placeholder. The values you type here are going to replace the placeholders respectively. So the first one I type is going to replace this, right? So I need the Fahrenheit temperature first. Now we know to get the Fahrenheit temperature of that object, we have a value. So we have a method for it called getFahrenheit, and getFahrenheit basically returns the Fahrenheit temperature of that object. So we can just call it and say, because we have an object called temp1, we can just say print temp1 dot get Fahrenheit, because we know that get Fahrenheit returns the ftemp of that field, and once it returns this system.out.printf is going to basically print out the formatted version of it. Okay, the second placeholder we know is for the Celsius temperature, and we know we have another method for that, so that's get Celsius, right? So we can just say temp1 dot get Celsius. And then the third placeholder we know that is Kelvin, and we have a method here called getKelvin that's going to basically return this calculation, and the system.out.printf is going to format that and print it for us. So temp1 dot get Kelvin this way, and then we are done. So let's delete that, then try to run this. Compile this, save this in the same file, sorry, in the same folder where this temperature class is saved at. Because once it sees this, it's going to try to look in that same folder for that temperature class. Okay, before it can create an object from it. Okay, so I'm saving it in that same folder. Okay, we have a couple of errors, and let's see what is happening. It says cannot find symbol get Fahrenheit. Okay, so that meaning that means it cannot find what this. It doesn't know what this is. Get I spelled it wrongly. If I look in the class get Fahrenheit, I type it this way, but over here I typed it wrongly. So it's supposed to be get Fahrenheit without an E here. Compile this, and now we have a different problem. It says cannot find symbol get Celsius. I spelled Celsius wrongly too, I guess. Okay, so over here I said get Celsius with S, and over here I said get Celsius with a C. So I need to spell it correctly and say get Celsius. Compile it again, and we don't have any issues. All right. So now let's run this and see what happens. See what happened. Now it says please enter a Fahrenheit temperature. I'm going to type in, let's say, I don't know, 34, and now it tells you the Fahrenheit temperature is 34, Celsius is 1.11, and then Kelvin is 274.11. I'm sure these numbers are correct. I don't want to get into the math, but we use the formula in the book, basically the formula in the question. That's what we used. So it should be correct. At least we know we are getting this back, so that's correct because we typed in 34. So yeah, so we can see that it's working. We can see everything is working. Did we have any mutator over here? For the mutator, we said setFahrenheit. Okay, we said setFahrenheit. So if we had, for example, a no arg constructor, if we had, for example, a no argument constructor that sets, for example, the ftemp field to 0.00, we can call the setFahrenheit mutator to basically set the ftemp field of that object manually by passing in a value here when we call it here. When we call it in the temperature test, okay, we can basically call the setFahrenheit temperature setFahrenheit to basically change the ftemp field with a value that we pass into that method. Okay, so we didn't use it here, but that's because we don't have a no arg constructor. If we try to use it, well, we can actually use it. Okay, we can do it. So over here we got the user Fahrenheit temperature, and we created it with when we were creating the object. So we created it with a constructor, in other words. But you can also ask the user again here for another value, right? We can ask the user again here for another value. Please enter another temperature. We can just do this. Please enter another Fahrenheit temperature, and we can say user Fahrenheit temperature is going to be here, and then we can now, instead of creating another object, we can just say temp1.set. We can use a mutator and say temp1.set setFahrenheit. setFahrenheit is going to accept the new user Fahrenheit temperature here. Okay, and then now we can go ahead and display this again. Display this result again, and we're going to get different values. All right, so yeah, I thought we had to have a no arg constructor. Now we can just use a mutator to do it. So yeah, we ask the user again. Now instead of now creating another object and then using the constructor to set the value, we just said temp1.set Fahrenheit temperature. We changed the Fahrenheit field. We changed the ftemp field of that object to the new value that the user just typed, another Fahrenheit temperature. And then we are displaying the result to see if they're different. Now before that, let's just create a line break. Okay, a line break before that. So a new line character before that, meaning move the position to the next line, so that this whole thing that comes after the new line character is displayed on that next line. Right. So now let's compile this, and then run it again and type in 56 for the first time, and then we have this. Now let's type in 57 for the second time, and then now we have different values. See, we have 56, 57, 1333, 1389, 286.33, 286.89. Now this is attached to this because there's nothing separating this system.out.printf here. So we can, after this string here, we can go ahead and have a new line character \n, so that, because that's the last thing that's displayed, Kelvin temperature. After Kelvin temperature, creates a new line character here. So basically when it sees this, it's going to move the position from here to the next line, and anything that comes after that new line character, which is this here, okay, is displayed on that next line, on that same next line. So that's one way to fix it. So 45 and 45. Oops, I mean I type in the same value, but let me just change the values just so it's not. So different values that we can see that they are not jammed together. Okay, they are on different, and we can see different values here. Okay, so that's how to use all the stuff in the class, basically all the methods, all the accesses, all the mutators, all the fields, all the constructors in the class. All right, so this program works. If you have any questions, please comment down below and I'll do everything to respond to them. Thank you very much for watching. Take care of yourselves. Thanks to all those who have been supporting through the support feature on YouTube, the support link on YouTube. And I'll see you next time with the next program. All right then, bye-bye.